Thank you. Thank you, Skip, for introduction. Thank you, everybody. It's always my pleasure to be back to Arkansas and specifically at this school. Last time I was here was in February 2010. And today, I'm not your speaker. Our guest of honor is Honorable Minister Albert Nsengiyumva, our Minister of Infrastructure. And so my role this afternoon is just to introduce him and give him a floor to speak to you. He's a man who has done remarkable work in terms of participating in the whole process of transforming Rwanda since after the tragedy of 1994. He has played different roles. He's a very strong technical person. He's done his studies in Africa, in Burundi, and then he went to Europe, in Belgium, to 2 different universities where he did electronics and industrial automation. In 1997, he was the first person who created the computer center at the Butare National University of Rwanda. And he played a very strong role in terms of building what he called Rwanda Development Gateway, which was an online tool that talked about Rwanda, presented all the possible potential opportunities for business and development for our country. And later on, he was appointed to head the Workforce Development Agency, which is one of the agencies that is helping Rwanda to create enough potential capital, human capital base to be part of the development process in Rwanda. And from that point, I think he was on the spotlight, and the president was watching what he was doing, connecting the fiber optic cable to the university and the other very strong technical initiatives. And he then got appointed in May this year as the Minister of Infrastructure, which is one of the biggest portfolios among other ministries in Rwanda. So please, ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome Honorable Minister Albert Nsengiyumva to deliver his remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the most difficult exercises that I'm used to, particularly having a privilege to be with you within the university, a college, a school like this. I was thinking probably by the end of my lecture, we'll have more questions than answers to your various questions. So I'm really privileged to be with you today, to talk about Rwanda, to talk about Africa in general, and especially to discuss on ways of strengthening our partnership between the United States and particularly the state of Arkansas and Rwanda in various aspects. I think that's really the main purpose of my lecture and our discussion that we're going to have today. Mr. Ambassador introduced me as somebody who's been working with universities, and in that capacity, I managed to link up with a number of institutions in the United States, being universities, companies, because my focus at that time was information technology, and a number of ways of looking at information technologies as a technology itself, but also an enabling tool to support development, to support partnership. So in that capacity, I managed to link up with quite a number of universities in the United States, and starting by the University of Maryland, where we developed quite a number of programs, including the support to establish a computer science department at the university, conflict management, which was also a very critical aspect after the genocide, and also distance learning, because distance learning was seen as a tool that can actually help Rwanda to build the required capacity as quickly as possible. I also work with the couple of universities in Washington State, including the Washington State University and the University of Washington, in a number of aspects around regulation. We had quite a number of regulations, especially in a country that is trying to attract more businesses in different sectors. Regulation was going to be a critical aspect to take into consideration. So with that briefing, I had a chance to look into a broader spectrum of development as far as Rwanda is concerned, starting by the key sectors that drive our economy: agriculture, tourism, mining, ICT. These are really very important sectors that create the backbone for the future of Rwanda. But it's in the same time, Rwanda specifically faces and still faces a number of issues, including demography, scarcity of land, its position vis-a-vis the sea. Our import and export has always been very expensive. I think we're talking about 40% that we need to add in order to compete with the countries in the region. The nearest sea is at about 1,600 kilometers. So that's really add on the challenges of being competitive, especially when we import or export. As I said, agriculture is a backbone, and we've done so well over the last few years, particularly strengthening the coffee and tea sector. These are the two major export products for Rwanda, and we've done so well in terms of attracting investors, but also looking at potential markets, being United States. We've opened up with other markets, niche, especially Japan, China, and Australia, being also our major markets as far as coffee is concerned. Tea is also another sector that we're actually trying to improve. We've actually got some good successes. There were competition recently in Kenya around the region where two of our most biggest tea factories were selected among the best, which is also a very important opportunity to create more visibility in this perspective. Of course, it's very important to look into the food security. I'm sure the recent news have shown some of the challenges happening around the Eastern African region, where the dry season has been so long to allow agriculture to perform. And Rwanda is really focusing on a program called Crop Intensification Program that will definitely help to meet some of the challenges around food security, which is also critical. I was also mentioning the issue of land scarcity because we're talking about 1 hectare per household, which is really critical. And this is really something we need to try as much as possible to make sure that we manage appropriately land, especially land to be used for agriculture. In this perspective, the government is encouraging cooperatives, as a way of merging different lands and help people to develop a strong agriculture. And each of these cooperatives can take up to 50 to 100 hectares and work together and develop whatever agriculture that can be supportive in this regard. Specifically, local development is one of the top priorities on the government agenda, because not only we need to look at matters around the governance per se, but also as a way of alleviating poverty as a really pretty critical aspect. In this perspective, we have programs like what we know Girinka. Girinka means 1 cow per family, to support family development by providing milk, but also by assisting the families themselves as they are able to sell milk. They can send their children to school. So there's a clear impact that we can see in terms of growing the economy of the household. More broadly, as a Minister of Infrastructure, I'm going to touch a bit on the enabling factor of a country like Rwanda, as I said, with its position, to make sure that we use infrastructure as a way to attract more investment in the country, because that's really another top priority of our government. Infrastructure in Rwanda touch on transport, it's a big energy, housing, and of course water and sanitation are part of it, and meteorology in general. So it's quite a big portfolio for a single minister to take up. But in the same time, the government decided to split the governance of this infrastructure, making sure the ministry focus on policy and coordination, while implementing agencies focus on really the execution of these policies. So on top of everything, energy is really critical. We are right now facing a huge shortage of energy. Our energy, especially electricity, comes particularly from hydropower, but we're trying also to develop other sources of energy, including peat, including geothermal, methane gas, and of course, solar. The current output is less than 100 megawatt, and is mainly coming from a thermal generator. The cost of production is still very high. Rwanda is not the only country that is facing a shortage of electricity, the entire region. You would expect if countries in the region are able to raise and to produce more, we can actually import. But any country in the region is facing that problem. And electricity is a single factor that can support other infrastructure to evolve. So it's really priority number one. The second is, of course, transport. Transport has always been a very important aspect in Rwanda, being roads, being the air, railway, and we have a good number of projects in this regard that can allow Rwanda to become more competitive in the region. We have a project to build a new airport because the development around the airline has gone very far. We've seen a competition taking place. So we move from the existing airport that is now congested to create a new airport that will allow us to bring more businesses in this perspective. The other project is the railway connecting Rwanda to the Indian Ocean, especially a port called Dar es Salaam. As I said at the beginning, the distance is around 1,600 kilometers. So it's a quite big project that will cost more than $4 billion US. That project, we work together with Tanzania and Burundi as the countries that are really associated to make sure that this happens. And we can imagine the impact that that can have. Having access to railway for Rwanda would definitely put up in a better position to compete, not only for import, but also for export to the rest of the world. Other projects in this perspective include the housing sector. The housing is still very low. The cost of housing in Rwanda is very high. We are looking at potential innovation in terms of lowering the cost of housing. And this goes in line with urban planning. As we've seen in a number of African countries, the downtown of major cities are already congested. So it's very important that as we move into infrastructure, we put up appropriate plans in place to make sure that we can control the development, especially in the urban areas. So as you can see, there's a great integration taking place, starting by energy, transport, housing, because they are all interlinked, and one needs definitely to look at them as consolidated. In this perspective, we believe Rwanda cannot achieve much if we are not able to attract potential investors in this regard. We've seen a number of initiatives taking place, not yet from this side, and this is one of the reasons why we had to plan this visit to come to Arkansas, because we see great potential. We've seen individuals from this place going to Rwanda in different aspects, focusing on finance, coffee, skills development. My friend Russell and his wife are just setting up what is known as the Musanze Opportunity Center that will provide training in different areas, including construction, hospitality, English, and entrepreneurship. This individual's initiative need to be turned into a broader perspective for partnership with the state of Arkansas. And the beauty of this is that we have a number of Rwandans that are currently taking different programs in this state. And from what I've heard, they are doing very well and being in engineering and other programs. And skills to us, it's a very important instrument. If we want to advance our development, we need to have our workforce that is trained, that is capable to take up various responsibilities, being in the government or in the private sector. And that's really also another area that we would like to strengthen, building a partnership that focuses on skills but also on investment, because the two can have a great correlation. As far as the economy in general is doing, Rwanda is really performing since 2005. Our economic growth has always been above 8%, which is one of the greatest on the continent. If you can see the economic finance crisis happening in the world, especially in Europe and the United States, where the economic growth is still around 1 to 2%, 8% is a great sign that there are potential businesses that one can initiate in Rwanda. It is that growth and a support from government, support to governance that provide us good values that can help us to sell the country as a way of attracting potential investment in the country. So, in brief, I'm here together with my colleagues to try and portray good achievements that are happening in Rwanda, showing clearly through witnesses from people that are doing right now business in Rwanda as a way of building more potential relationship and partnership with the state of Arkansas, picking from any of the sectors that I've already mentioned. Some of the businesses that we'll be visiting include energy, include IT, include construction. All these are very important to us because they create a potential growth in a country that still have a way to go in terms of providing more opportunities for job creation, for economic growth in Rwanda. So I'll be so happy to engage with you, probably to provide more insight and to respond. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to respond to all your questions. As I said, I may also have questions to you, especially being a student in an area that I think is very important. Public service is really critical, as I understand, because it gives opportunity for students as they come to Rwanda, some of them, to look into a variety of changes and reform that we are busy involving, and give their thought and give their perspective as a way of building a strong country that rely on its own people and develop economic as a way forward. So I'd like to thank you for being here, and I'm sure this is going to be an interactive session where we can actually answer to your various questions or comments to what I've just mentioned. Thanks a lot.
All right, we will have some time for questions. And if we can wait till we get the microphones so that everybody can hear. We have a question right back here behind you, Stephen.
Mr. Minister, you spoke of 8% growth. You spoke, that's GDP, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you link the leadership, including yourself, in Rwanda to the growth of the country, the GDP, and future growth of the GDP in Rwanda?
Mm-hmm. I will respond to one, or we'll pick a number of questions. What is your preference?
No, we'll take them one at a time.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Good. Yeah, it's okay. It's
yeah,
fine.
I know. That's right. You usually write them all down. That's my fault. But we'll take them one at a time.
Yeah.
I should have said that.
Basically, the way I understand the question is the linkage between the governance and the current governance and the GDP. Of course, as I said, if you look at the current leadership in Rwanda compared to what has happened in the past, the current leadership focuses on building and empowering people. I think we've got experience in a number of African countries where we rely so much on aid. And this has been one of the major failures if you look at a number of Africans, because Africans were seen as people to assist, not people to empower. And this has been really very important. So our leadership, starting by the president, has gone out and speak out and show clearly that if we want Africa to move and become a strong partner, we need to empower people. And we have seen the potential that we have in different African countries, including Rwanda, when people are provided with opportunities for skills, opportunities for innovation, they can perform. We've got a good number of examples in a country. Picking of coffee, if I see the changes that have happened over the last 10 years in the coffee sector, where Rwanda is currently one of the top countries that is actually moving forward, I think that really is a good example to show how a good leadership can transform people, can empower people so that they can become more sustainable. So in this perspective, I think we've seen Rwanda moving towards transforming the key sectors, including agriculture, because those are the sectors that can affect directly the life of people, being construction, where we see a number of entrepreneurs being at the forefront trying to provide all kinds of services in this regard. And of course, tourism. Tourism has been really a great sector that is playing a very important role in this perspective. So that's really, I think the leadership in Rwanda has been at the forefront trying to empower people and trying also to create opportunities for partnership. We've seen a number of people from this side, from the other side, coming to Rwanda and link with our different organizations in terms of create more economic development for the country. And this really is playing a very important role in this perspective. Thank you.
All right, I have a question right over here.
Hi, my name is Kate Coffey. I'm a second-year student here at the Clinton School. I thought your presentation and the answer to your question just now made very clear the link between human development and infrastructure development.
Sure.
And if you could just speak a little bit to how the Rwandan government is trying to coordinate these two forms of development to work together. Thank you.
It's always it's a very interesting question because it's always a challenge for a country like Rwanda that has limited resources to be able to raise the required financial resources and meet the infrastructure development. Infrastructure, it's a long-term investment and very costly. We are talking about the roads, for example. Because of the lack of appropriate technologies and probably some of the issues related to the geographical configuration of the country, roads have always been very expensive. I recall one of the figures was given to build 1 kilometer of a tarmac is around $1 million US. And you can imagine how costly it is to do that. Picking from the airport, the initial figure initial estimate that we have got so far around the new airport suggests that it will not be less than $400 million US to build a new airport. And this airport is not really a big one. It's a normal airport that can compete with other airports in the region. Energy today in Rwanda, if we are to produce energy, electricity through hydro power, 1 megawatt will roughly cost around $4 million US. So just to give you an idea of how challenging is infrastructure in this perspective. So what the government is doing is actually moving into two major wings that can support infrastructure development. One side is the institutional arrangement. As I said at the beginning, the ministry focuses on policy and coordination, while the implementing agencies are really being strengthened in order to provide the execution or to move into execution of this project. That's one aspect of an institution. The second aspect is the establishment, which is also part of an institutional arrangement, of what we call Rwanda Development Board, which is a one-stop center that facilitates potential investors and partners as they come to participate in the building of the country, being on profit or non-for-profit side. And more importantly is the facilitation that the government is putting in place. Whenever we get an opportunity to attract an investor, there are quite a number of incentives that the government provides for one to invest in Rwanda, which is also a very critical element. So in this perspective, we look into all kinds of models that are known. For example, for the airport, the initial idea is to promote what is known as BOT. You build, you operate, and then you transfer, because the cost is so huge for the government to be able to meet the investment. As far as energy is concerned, we are promoting what we call IPP, Independent Power Producer. We have a company, a public company as a utility that is responsible for electricity, water, and sanitation. But the government is really very much encouraging private to come, especially at the side of generation, electricity generation. And such a company can negotiate with the company, with the utility, what is known as the PPA, a power purchase agreement, where the feed-in tariff become a very determinant factor for one to invest in electricity. So this is really also another way of attracting the private sector investment in this regard. There is another aspect that is critical that the government is also focusing on, which is the regional integration. Because a number of these infrastructure issues I've actually mentioned are also regional, have some regional connotation, regional aspects, being roads, being railway, airport, energy. So we've got a number of projects that we are actually trying to feature as part of activities that the government negotiate with the region. We are very much involved with the East African region, the East African community that involves 5 countries from Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. Infrastructure is one of the key components as part of the East African region. So we have had projects with energy. We have a couple of hydropower plants that we are developing in that perspective. As I said, the railway is also another example. We are developing also a good understanding around how to manage the roads construction around the region, especially what we call a transnational roads that can connect country to country. So those are different undertakings that will definitely determine the future of our infrastructure in the country. Yeah.
I have a question back there. Katie, you have a question right there.
Hi, my name is Katie Milligan. I'm a first-year student. Thank you so much for coming. My question is, in countries surrounding Rwanda, such as the DRC, with isolated conflicts, how do you see that and the development of the infrastructure in Rwanda?
Mm-hmm. Of course, as I said, I just mentioned one regional organization. We also have another regional organization that links us with Congo and Burundi. Of course, as you can imagine, DRC is a huge country. It's a huge country. We are only facing the east part of the Congo, and I think they have about 9 countries surrounding the DRC, so it's quite huge. And we have developed a couple of projects, especially around the Lake Kivu, where the lake can offer, as I said, a methane gas as one of the assets that we can use to promote and develop energy in Rwanda. We are also having a big project on hydro project, what is known as Ruzizi, which is the river between Congo and Rwanda. But more importantly, with Congo, we've created synergies around the borders to see how much we can actually, because most of the infrastructure are dependent. So when we construct a road on our side, it's very important to make sure that there is actually continuity on the other side. So we've seen a number of international organizations that are interested to support any regional project that connect Rwanda and Congo. And it's also very important as part of the peace building. You know, the peace building initiative suggests that once we come up with concrete project, being infrastructure or economic development in general, that will definitely create more chances to strengthen the current political relationship that we have with the Congolese government. Thank you.
We get your question right here, and I'll give it to you.
Thank you very much. My question is that, considering what is happening in African countries presently, we have unrest in some parts. Investors will like to go to where there is political stability. Mm-hmm. Political stability leads to economic stability. How stable is the political terrain of Rwanda? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Again, as I suggested when I start my speech, as you recall, Rwanda is a country, it's a post-genocide country. Before we engage into economic development, it was very critical to reunite Rwandans, especially giving them confidence that the future can only be good as people believe in each other, as people come together. I think that has been really the focus of the country since the genocide. So we've seen a number of initiatives in this regard, being the institutional, at the institutional level, but at the country at large, trying to make sure that on one side, justice is put in place, so that the justice system is built to make sure that it handles a number of issues associated with the war and the genocide. But also in terms of governance, make sure that people that come into governance are well prepared to play their role, not to serve themselves, but to serve the people. I think this has been a challenge in most of African countries. Even if we talk about war, we talk about genocide, we've found that as far as governance is concerned, we've been lacking good leaders, even at the low level. So you definitely have to have leaders that are ready to serve, not to serve themselves, but to serve the community. And this has been really a great exercise in this perspective. From there, there have been now reforms, notably the decentralization, creating local government, especially ownership from communities, to be part of the decision-making process. And if there is a country I know that has been really successful in this regard, is Rwanda, especially in the African context. The local, the decentralization, it's a program that started almost 7 to 8 years ago. And now you can see now the product. You can see what is taking place. People now believe in government. People are playing a very important role in terms of deciding where they want their communities to go. And that actually has created a foundation for any economic development at the local level. So to me, I think looking at the last 8 years where the country had been focusing on making sure that we empower people, we create more good leaders to support whatever development that is happening, this has really, today we are actually celebrating the product that come out of that. And you can see that even partners from outside can come and deal directly with the local government, which is, to me, a very important success story that we can tell people. Of course, there are still challenges. As I said, skills remain a very important aspect if we want the economy to move fast and to respond to the poverty issues that we are facing in Rwanda. And that really can only happen once the leadership is already created, even at the local level. Second, there's also an opportunity in Rwanda than elsewhere where the equality between women and men has really been a very challenging. You know, the population of Rwanda is distributed, I think it's 60 or 55, 45. So women are more important than men, and they are playing a very important role in the leadership of the country, from the top to the low level. And this is also something we need to take into consideration as we move into a social and economic development.
Let me ask the people from Arkansas who are here, how many of you are working in Rwanda, have projects in Rwanda? Mm-hmm. Look at this. This is an amazing number of people. Mm-hmm. Students? Mm-hmm. Adults, please hold your hands up again. Mm-hmm. Yes, students? Yeah. Catch these people now. They're doing some good stuff. Mr. Minister, I want to thank you for being here very much. Mm-hmm. Mr. Ambassador, thank you. Shelby, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here. Okay.